Welcome to Equals Everyone. This is Naf.
Yes, welcome to Equals Everyone. This is Max. And how are you, Nav?
I'm doing really good, Max. London is finally sunny, so feeling good. How about you? What are you listening to these days?
Right, today I've been listening to, it's about a 10-part podcast on the history of the Cold War, 1950, 1955. Really, really interesting.
That sounds really, really interesting. I would love to hear more about it. I'm actually listening to this fantastic comedian, Jessica Foster-Q, who's into strength training. And in fact, she made a great joke about today's topic. She says that the best thing she loves about weightlifting is that it is truly meritocratic. The more effort you put in, the more you get out. If you don't work hard, you won't succeed. Wouldn't it be incredible if this applied to other areas of life, Max?
That's true. Yeah, and that is a great link to today's topic. And I love that you're listening to amusing comedians and I'm listening to boring history podcasts. Today's topic is about the myth of meritocracy. So, this very powerful myth that the only thing between you and success is how hard you work or how well you do in your studies. Yeah, that's the topic today.
I'm really happy that we get to explore this topic with Faiza Shaheen. She is someone who has put the issue of social mobility on the map.
And she's written a book about meritocracy and about her life, which is called Know Your Place. It's a fantastic book, isn't it now?
I really love it. It's a great book. And let's get into the interview, Max.
Yeah, let's do it.
Faiz, I'm really thrilled to have you on our podcast. I loved your book, Know Your Place. It's incredible. It made me learn a lot about you. That your fight for justice comes from a very personal place. I could feel your passion, your hope, and also your pain as I read it. To be honest, I actually cried, especially reading about your mom's struggle. Could you share with our listeners what drives you to fight for justice and equality?
Yeah, thank you for that, Naf. It's always so nice to get positive feedback. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Certainly, when I set out to write the book, it was about trying to get out a kind of few frustrations and my own story. And actually, someone that was interviewing me on the book said that, oh, it feels like you've been writing this book your whole life. And I think I did recognize that there was parts of my story and my journey that would really lend itself to talking about inequality and life chances. And partly because I'm often introduced or used as this way to say that, look, Pfizer did it, anyone can do it, which is like, oh, look, Pfizer was the daughter of a car mechanic, difficult family circumstances. Her mum told her when she was 4 years old that one day you'll go to the University of Oxford. And, because of her mum's dreams, that happened. And now she's running for parliament. And that's the kind of, Hollywood story that's kind of told around me. And sometimes I'm introduced that way. And I find it deeply frustrating because of course, my mum was amazing and did incredible things for me, but I also had the state. I was also incredibly lucky to meet teachers along the way that supported me. We had a period of our childhood where we were on benefits, and so the welfare state was incredibly important. Had we not had that, we would have been in a very difficult situation. And so, often myself and others that are, shown to be this emblem of anyone can make it, all of this way in which collective wealth, collective coming together and supporting each other is stripped out. And so, I really wanted to highlight that other part of my story and to demonstrate that in some ways, because of the luck, because of some of the things that happened along the way and the resources we were able to access, some of which have been taken away now, we or I was able to make a journey that was, an exception, but it's an exception that only proves the rule. And we spend all this time just focusing on these individuals that we consider to have made it, and we don't think about the rules of society that actually keep most of us in our place.
But is that really true? I mean, around us, we see so many people of colour in powerful positions now. I mean, even Prime Minister here in the UK is a man of Indian heritage. I mean, isn't it true that to some extent, we are seeing greater diversity?
We always focus on that. Okay, it is possible. It is possible, but that possibility is so much smaller. And why are we asking our children to be superheroes in this way and to overcome these insane barriers for the sake of telling some American dream like story? Rather than saying, wait, why are these chances so different? And why aren't we doing much more to address the inequalities that drive these huge differences?
Can I ask a little bit more about the kind of the extent to which this idea of the American dream or the British dream, it is useful in some sense because it doesn't come from nowhere, and it is. You talk in the book how about a lot of time and effort is put into maintaining that idea and maintaining that story. Could you say a little about that and why that happens in our cultural life in public life?
Yeah, I think there's like two key reasons. One is that in some way we have to justify growing inequalities that we have. And so the story that is told is that, well, they deserve it. They worked harder. People at the top deserve to be there. And you can do it too. So, don't be upset about the inequalities in society. That's a sign that people are working harder than others. And there's a route for you too. And the second thing is that, of course, you know, life is not easy for most people. So of course you want to believe that things are going to get better, that your children can do anything that they want to do. It's a very emotive feeling. Of course, it's a visceral thing that parents have with their kids, that they want them to have a better life. So you need to believe in that because it's something that gets you through hardship. It gives something for people that are struggling to hope for and to imagine a better future. So it's an alluring story to tell. And of course, there's so much propaganda around these stories. Of course, the American dream and a lot of like Hollywood movies have elements of this. Even reality TV shows. When I was doing research for the book, I found all these papers that looked at how a lot of reality TV shows, when they have like Secret Millionaire and like it could be you, and so there's a lot of that built up around it because the reality is so stark that you've got to tell that story to people, otherwise it looks quite dismal otherwise.
But this makes me think, Faiza, all these individual stories of success, how much capitalism is based on a false narrative, no? Because the main selling point of capitalism is that everyone has access to equal opportunity as long as they put in the work. Even the American dream, I think, is embedded in capitalism. But reading your book and now listening to you makes me realize how difficult, almost impossible it is for someone from a working class background or, for a person of color to progress. So, can we say that capitalism has failed on its main selling point?
Yeah, I mean, it just as the work of Piketty and others has shown, capitalism is leading to essentially wealth hoarding at the top. And with that hoarding of wealth at the top, there is a hoarding of opportunities because if you've got that kind of money, you're not going to want your kids to fall down the economic hierarchy. And it's very hard for them to fall down the economic hierarchy, actually. When you look at pictures of journeys, you can see that basically those at the top go from being rich to staying rich. They're on a straight escalator across. It's just actually similarly, unfortunately, for so many people that are born poor, capitalism actually is causing us to be stuck. When I was doing work for the book during COVID, there was like this article. I think Elon Musk had become the richest man in the world at that time, and there was this article in BBC was like 5 lessons to learn from Elon Musk, and it was so ridiculous. It was like, don't worry about money and focus on your passion and all of those things. And it didn't say anywhere about the fact that this man had been born white in apartheid South Africa. I mean, can you imagine? He didn't even need to compete with most of the population. It didn't talk about the wealth of his family. It didn't talk about the ways in which the state had often bailed him and his company out at times of hardship. And it kind of just notched it all up to his personal um, uh, intellect, really, and perseverance. And it was just quite striking how far that story is from the reality. And that's the story they have to tell in capitalism. There's some really good research done by one of my colleagues at LSE, Sam Friedman, on how people often want to make up that they have these working class backgrounds because they want to be able to say that it was all me and it was me pulling myself up by my bootstraps and making this happen. And they don't want to recognize the ways in which context and privilege and where they were born into, the families they were born into, the country they were born into, which is the biggest defining factor in your life outcomes, made a difference. And that is what you're given points for in society.
Actually, on that, another big bit of the book to talk about the kind of role of empire and colonialism, like in your background and in kind of global inequality. So, would you want to say a bit about that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I really wanted to get into these disparities that I've seen between the life I've had here and especially my family in Pakistan, who are at best kind of lower middle class, and really the ways in which my dad, having come from Fiji and being the grandchild of indentured labor, and my mum having come from Pakistan with her family moving because of partition and having lost everything and starting again. How those stories are linked to the UK and outside influence, and how their families have fared in the context of the British leaving and leaving those places often in a mess. And so, yeah, I look at things like the difference in life chances, looking at how some of my family have just struggled so much with healthcare, and how many of them have passed away at a really young age. And then I have this one story of one of my first cousins who got cancer at a really young age, and um, his family didn't have a lot of money, and they'd initially gone to a doctor who wasn't really a doctor, and then they'd kind of discovered his cancer quite late on, and then had some treatment, but it wasn't really good enough, and then he got cancer again, and then the third time he got cancer was only still sort of 2021, and my mum had passed away. So instead they came to me to ask for advice and support, and I just reached out to, I had a PhD friend who's from the Pakistani elite, and I reached out to her sister in Karachi. They live in the same city, like literally the same city. And she spoke to someone in her family who was like on the board of some hospital, and she came back to me. She said, actually, he can go and get free bone marrow transplant at this hospital. And so my family living in the same city had no idea, thought that he had no chance of survival, and that he would just maybe do radiation treatment again, and we'd have to try and raise money for him. Because of my elite connections in Pakistan, he was able to get this healthcare, and mashallah is still alive now and doing well, sort of 7 years later, because of that. And it's just quite striking how much having those connections matter. I mean, it matters here, but at least we have the NHS. But in countries like Pakistan, where there isn't public healthcare, where there isn't that kind of way to access universal healthcare, it matters even more. And so, yeah, there's lots of examples of things like that in the book that demonstrate these huge inequalities in the world that cannot be um, totted up to some individual action. Like, that's nothing to do with my cousin hasn't done anything to, um, you know, for him to have grown up in that context, but because of a lot of decisions that were made often many years before by a state far away, that's the context in which they live in.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Faiza. I could relate to that story. From Pakistan, let's move back to the UK and talk about the rich. As an outsider, I find it so interesting how much the upper classes in the UK have so much power, how much they dominate UK life. What is your experience of this?
Yeah, so obviously growing up in East London, I didn't really know much about the rich at all. I'd never been exposed to them. My idea of someone being rich was having like a four-bedroom house. I mean, that was being rich. And then when I went to Oxford and was suddenly confronted with people with just so much wealth and sense of entitlement, it was really eye-opening. And I think the thing that I've seen over the years, being the person in the room, especially when I was doing a lot of media, is just what a tight knit club they are. And they really do just stick with each other. And so for the rest of us, even if we, end up in those green rooms, and often as the token person making an argument for less inequality and democratic socialism, we are always on the outside, and they are always a club. And one thing I really noticed as well, living in the US for a little while, was just how much class plays a role in British society. It just is so dominant as our way of putting people into the hierarchy, like how people speak, and the way they carry themselves, and the immediate pigeonholing that happens, because you're seen as being at the top or in the middle of the or at the bottom of the spectrum. And the sense that we still have in this country of a deference to the elite, um, and the way in which we celebrate British culture is so often not about the working classes. It is so often about the royal family, and all of our TV exports are like Downton Abbey and Jane Austen novels and all of those things. Like, this is the culture we celebrate. That's like the image we give of this country, and it's really, really damaging.
Absolutely, Faiza. The UK elites are not only celebrated within the UK, but across the world, as you said. Look how millions, if not billions, followed the royal wedding as if it was the most important event, even as the world faced multiple crises. While we're talking about other parts of the world, Faiza, I was reflecting on inequality in Ethiopia or Nigeria or even Brazil. How much is the UK unique with its famous upper classes and lack of chances for the poorest to get on? Do you see this in other parts of the world too?
Yeah, no, we do see it in other parts of the world. Um, and it's because wherever there is huge inequalities, wherever there is this wealth hoarding, there is a similar drive by those at the top to protect that and to protect their offspring, and to stack the odds in their favor. And so, yes, you do see a similar kind of elite circle in different countries where people seem to know each other, and have gone to the same schools and known each other for generations. And I've spent the last couple of years working with governments around the world, and you definitely do see that. Even, interestingly, even amongst those that consider themselves to be leftists, they do tend to come from wealthier backgrounds, and it's a very this the social immobility of people rather than mobility is enduring in many countries. So there's this great book called The Sun Also Rises, and it shows that across time and across countries, actually it's the case that the rich tend to stay rich. Whether you look at surnames, whether you look at the dynasties of countries, not just in terms of royalty, but the political dynasties, you see the same names and the same families crop up again and again. And that is because of economic inequality. It is because of the privilege and the knowledge that is gained once your family is there, on how to play the system, and how to make sure that you stay at the top of that system.
Thank you so much, Faiza. We're truly inspired by your story. Your book is brilliant, and your work to fight inequality. Long may it continue. So thank you very much.
It's been amazing talking to you, Faiza. Thank you so much.
So So, Naf, what did you think of that?
Wow, Max, I really love talking to Faiza. What an incredible person. I was thinking, as a society, how much we have been told and also how much we have come to celebrate these individual stories of success. Like how the working class or people of color lift themselves up by their bootstrap and make something of themselves. We are given examples of Alan Sugar, no, or Obama, and the message is there's hope for you all. You can achieve anything. But I think this is a lie, no? It's a distraction, an illusion. These individual stories don't represent the whole. But more than anything, I think the danger is it takes away the responsibility from the state. And ultimately, it's the state and wider society that have to make sure that everyone's need is met and that everyone has an equal opportunity in life.
Yes, I think that's true, and it's also true for the whole idea of a meritocracy. Even a meritocracy is a bad thing in many ways.
What do you mean by that, Max? Surely it's a good thing, no?
No, because a meritocracy is still focused on individual stories, individual effort. But instead of your bank balance, I mean, no one wants a plutocracy. No one wants a situation where the only people in society who get things, healthcare, houses, a decent life, are rich people. But if we just substitute that for clever people, so there's still only a small group of people, but an academic gets to live in a big fancy house, but a plumber or a nurse lives in a small place and doesn't have access to healthcare. That's no society that we want to live in. We want more equal societies where everyone's needs are met and everyone gets to live a decent life. So uh, a meritocracy is not what we want.
I see what you mean. That's such a powerful point to make, Max. I'm also thinking, what do we do next? We need to talk about this more in public. We need to create awareness of this important issue. And I think politics need to re engage with this. And as Faiza said, we can fight inequality and make a change.
I mean, Faiza's very inspiring. Her story, her life, and her interpretation of her life, that she sees it not that she herself has fought her way to the top, but that it's society that needs to be changed is truly inspiring. It makes me want to go out and do more to fight inequality and build a more equal world. So yeah, truly inspiring interview.
So true. That's a great note to end it there. Thank you, everyone, for listening as always. Please do leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening. Also, please share it with friends, family, and colleagues, and do join us next time.
Yes, thank you everyone. Talk to you next time.